Tonight, the grim new milestone in the coronavirus crisis. The U.S. surpassing 4 million cases. California and Florida, their deadliest days yet. And the warning for nearly a dozen major cities. What Dr. Birx reportedly said they must immediately do. President Trump's surprise announcement late today. The Republican convention in Florida canceled over COVID. And his major reversal on reopening schools. Alarming new jobless numbers with that extra $600 in unemployment benefits days from running out. Will Congress reach a deal to extend it? Chaos in Portland, federal agents tear gassing the crowd, among them the mayor. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez condemning a GOP congressman after he denied attacking her with profanity. The victory for Michael Cohen, a judge finding he was locked up for planning a Trump tell-all. NBC News exclusive, two of the British ISIS terrorists dubbed the Beatles, the cell that murdered American hostages, including James Foley and Kayla Mueller, what they now admit to doing as the families of those Americans call for justice.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. It's becoming more and more likely that you or someone you know personally has been infected with coronavirus. Tonight, the running tally of confirmed U.S. cases has reached 4 million. While many recover or do fine, deaths continue to climb. The death toll now nearly 145,000. And tonight, urgent attention being directed towards nearly a dozen cities in deepening trouble. And that's where our reporting begins tonight with Miguel Almaguer.
Officially eclipsing 4 million infections, tonight the true number of COVID cases in the U.S. is without doubt significantly higher. The new milestone reached today as a top health official sounds the alarm for 11 American cities in trouble after testing results came back from metro areas like Cleveland, Columbus, Minneapolis, and New Orleans. Dr. Deborah Birx, in a private call obtained by the Center for Public Integrity, warned local leaders they need to take aggressive steps to mitigate their outbreaks.
We're tracking this very closely. We're working with the state officials to make sure we're responding together.
The push to take quick action, no surprise to the mayor of Indianapolis, where the pandemic has exploded.
Over the last week, our city's positivity rate has jumped by nearly 50%.
As states like Florida set new hospitalizations and death records, in hard-hit Texas, morgues are so overwhelmed, refrigerator trucks are arriving in one county to store the dead.
Right now, we have a crisis. 35 people that passed away just today, maybe more.
For some, the virus testing their faith after 13 sisters who belong to the same Michigan convent lost their lives to COVID. In Illinois, 30-year-old Jonathan Davila recovered from the virus to only later be readmitted to the ER. His wife thought she would lose him.
I was starting to think of how I was going to tell my kids that they weren't going to have their dad.
Today, Davila is learning to walk again.
I'd rather be here like this than not be here at all.
After 8,000 deaths in California, here in Los Angeles, one of the nation's most dangerous hotspots, transmissions may be leveling off. Perhaps hope on the horizon.
Today, the nation's largest movie theater chain, AMC, announced they plan to reopen many locations by mid to late August. The U.S. Air Force Academy set to become one of the first universities in the nation to welcome students back on campus this month.
You wish you could go and be there.
But Alexandria Cubias knows the dangers of COVID too well. She lost her father and sister just days apart.
I never, in 100 million years, I would never wish this for anyone to go through.
Tonight, one family's unimaginable loss as a record number of Americans become infected with the virus. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Now to the major news from the White House. President Trump announcing tonight that Republican National Convention events scheduled for next month in Jacksonville, Florida, have been canceled because of the pandemic. Our Kristen Welker has late details now.
Tonight, a rare retreat from President Trump. With cases of COVID surging in Florida, the president announcing he is canceling his plans to hold the Republican National Convention in Jacksonville.
But I looked at my team and I said, the timing for this event is not right. It's just not right with what's happened recently, the flare-up in Florida. to have a big convention. It's not the right time. It's really something that, for me, I have to protect the American people.
The president saying he is still trying to determine the location of his convention speech, and delegates will cast their votes in North Carolina, where it was originally scheduled. Tonight, the president was asked what made him change his mind.
I would just say safety. We have to be vigilant. We have to be careful. And we also have to set an example.
And on schools reopening in the fall, the president said the CDC will soon provide more guidance, and for the first time acknowledged some schools may need to delay.
In cities or states that are current hotspots, and you'll see that in the map behind me, districts may need to delay reopening for a few weeks, and that's possible. That'll be up to governors. The decision should be made based on the data and the facts on the grounds in each community, but every district should be actively making preparations to open.
It comes amid a setback for Senate Republicans who have been struggling to reach an agreement on a $1 trillion relief package. The emerging element so far, $16 billion of new funding for COVID testing, $105 billion to reopen schools, and more direct payments to Americans. But among the key sticking points, those $600 weekly payments, unemployment benefits set to expire at the end of the month. The White House says it wants the amount to be lowered to 70% of a person's paycheck. Fiscal conservatives say even that's too much, and they haven't even started negotiating in earnest with Democrats.
The Republican disarray and dithering has serious, potentially deadly consequences for tens of millions of Americans.
Now, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the Trump administration will review the details of the relief package, and they hope to have an announcement next week. Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House. Thanks. Millions of Americans are especially anxious tonight as those extra $600 a week jobless payments are about to come to an end, just as claims for unemployment benefits rose. With more, here's Jolene Kent.
Cindy Crow has relied on the $600 weekly payment from the CARES Act since her New Orleans tour business shut down due to the pandemic.
It's been very, very difficult.
If that money goes away,
it means I'm homeless. There's no answer. I don't have an option.
Across the country, rising anxiety and unemployment claims. More than 1.4 million new jobless claims were filed last week, the first increase since late March, and far higher than the 282,000 claims before the pandemic. And securing benefits in the first place is still a problem for some, like in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
It's been terrible. It's slow, it's outdated.
And without the $600 a week supplement, unemployed workers would get on average $383 a week. The extra money, however, has made it difficult for Gary Brammer to fully staff his Indiana restaurant.
Some of them were making more money to stay home. I didn't have enough staff to work Monday through Saturday. So I had to start closing on Mondays because I just didn't have enough people.
This is the dilemma in Washington.
There's an argument being made by the president himself that the $600 a week is actually discouraging people from going back to work.
What's discouraging people from going back to work is the unsafe conditions in because of COVID. Americans are hardworking. They take care of their families. They don't need an incentive. And so a $600 payment is not going to be a disincentive. When we take these benefits away, we're looking at a deeper and longer recession, which is not what we want.
We need help, not just here in New Orleans, but all across the country.
The final payments will be sent out this weekend. But even if a deal is struck on Capitol Hill in the coming days, there's likely to be a delay in getting that money to people. Lester?
Jolene Kent tonight. Thank you. This evening, the Justice Department's Inspector General has opened an investigation into the use of force by federal agents in Portland, Oregon, as that city's mayor found himself in the middle of new violent clashes. More from Aaron McLaughlin.
Overnight in Portland, protesters stormed the federal courthouse, some launching flares and fireworks over the steel barricade. Federal agents respond with tear gas. Portland police declared a riot. Among those gassed, Portland's Democratic mayor.
I want to thank the thousands of you who've come out to oppose the Trump administration's occupation of our city.
Ted Wheeler, who's also Portland's police commissioner, was booed by protesters who criticized his leadership of Portland's police. Last night's clash is just the latest since federal agents arrived here to protect federal property after over 50 days of protests that have included violence against police and looting.
We have the authority to make arrests on individuals that are targeting that courthouse.
But late today, the Justice Department's Inspector General announced he'll review use of force complaints against federal personnel here. Protester Jennifer Christensen was arrested by federal agents. Like Wheeler, she wants them out.
I want to be cared for by members of my own community. We have very little need for policing. We need community services.
The Inspector General is not only reviewing what happened here in Portland, but also the federal response to protesters in Washington, D.C. Lester?
All right, Aaron, thanks. A federal judge today ordered Michael Cohen, President Trump's former personal lawyer, released from prison. The judge ruled that in sending Cohen back to prison earlier this month, federal officials had retaliated against him for his plan to write a tell-all book about the president. He'll serve the rest of his sentence for campaign finance violations at home. Now to a dramatic moment on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez condemning a Republican colleague after she says he confronted her and hurled profanity-laced insults. Casey Hunt has details.
In a fiery speech on the House floor, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez standing her ground.
In front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman.
The confrontation happened Monday, but Ocasio-Cortez didn't confirm the Hill newspaper's reporting until after Ted Yoho said this.
The offensive name-calling words attributed to me by the press were never spoken to my colleagues, and if they were construed that way, I apologize for their misunderstanding. I cannot apologize for my passion.
Ocasio-Cortez called that an excuse, not an apology, making the case it's about more than just one argument.
I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's, and I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new, and that is the problem.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recalling her own experience.
They've called me names for at least 20 years of leadership, 18 years of leadership.
This issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that.
Democrats demanding Republicans condemn Yoho, but he's still denying he used the words. And Republican leader Kevin McCarthy today said he accepts Yoho's apology. Lester?
Casey Hunt tonight. Thank you. We're tracking a triple threat this evening. Tropical storm Gonzalo barreling toward the Caribbean. It could become the Atlantic season's first hurricane. In the Pacific, Hurricane Douglas. That's a Category 3 as it approaches Hawaii right now. And in the Gulf, a tropical depression taking aim, warnings and watches up along the Texas coast. We'll keep an eye on all of it. The tropics starting to heat up. In 60 seconds, the exclusive interview with two members of ISIS. Their shocking new admissions about American aid workers and journalists who were killed. And Richard Engel with the families of those Americans calling for justice. Back now with an NBC News exclusive. The interview with two British members of the ISIS terror cell known as the Beatles. Richard Engel with what they now admit to doing and reaction from the families of slain Americans, those families now demanding justice.
It's been nearly 6 years since the kidnapping and savage murders by ISIS of American aid workers Kayla Mueller and Peter Kossig, and journalists Stephen Sotloff and James Foley. Tonight, in an exclusive interview obtained by NBC News, new details about how Jim stood up to his captors from two of the ISIS members who held him and the other hostages.
If the guard would ask, is the food enough? Some of the other prisoners were very timid. There was always him who would say, it's not enough. Wow. He would take because he would think that he's going to get punished for it. But
punishment meant torture. These two men, now in U.S. custody in Iraq, were part of the ISIS terror cell nicknamed the Beatles for their British accents. They claim they didn't participate in torture and executions, but do admit abuse.
I've hit most of the prisoners for
Previously, they'd pretended not to know Kayla Mueller, who was kidnapped one day after arriving in Syria.
Did you ever meet Kayla Mueller?
Who? Didn't meet any foreign non-Muslims.
Now they remember her, including how they got her parents' email address to send ransom notes demanding more than $6 million and threatening murder.
She was very scared.
In a room by herself that no one would go in.
We showed Kayla's dad the disturbing interviews.
Of course, they're not going to tell the dark side of the story. They were their handlers. They shackled them and took them to the bathroom twice a day. At times, Kayla was shackled all night.
But the case against the two has been held up, with a British court ruling the U.S. won't get crucial evidence from British investigators unless the death penalty is off the table. Jim's mom, Diane Foley.
Will this give you any kind of closure?
I want them to be held accountable. Accountability is important. Otherwise, we could never deter crimes, right?
Tonight, American officials tell NBC News the U.S. is determined to arrange for the two men to face charges in an American courtroom. Lester?
Absolutely chilling. Richard Engel tonight. Thanks. Let's turn now to our series examining inequality in America. We want to take a look at how COVID-19 is pushing families to find creative solutions to teaching their kids during the pandemic. That is, if they can afford it. Stephanie Gosk explains.
Good. For a lot of parents, this spring revealed a painful truth. They aren't good teachers, like single mom Zoe Fishman in Atlanta.
Being a single parent is hard enough, but this was on another level of exhaustion.
Facing another school year of at least some remote learning, Fishman is gathering a group of parents who plan to hire her brother, a teacher, to teach the kids when they aren't in school.
5 families, 2 hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Would you rely on the curriculum of the public school system?
Yes. Yes. We're not asking Brenner to reinvent the wheel.
It is a teaching strategy now sweeping the country, the pandemic pod, allowing kids to be together and learn while their parents work.
It was tiring, not fun.
Online learning was tough for Blake Tassie, a 3rd grader outside of Washington, D.C. His parents say the pods are just what he needs.
You really want to get the best for your child, and you want to maximize the learning on those online days.
But for many families, it's just too costly. The teachers have to be paid, and in some cases, the space being used costs money too.
For those families that are most vulnerable, particularly lower income families, Black families, brown families, language minority families, they're locked out of that.
Experts say that will widen the education gap.
They're creating their own form of private school. When you start to do that, we know that the inequality effects are going to multiply over time.
Zoe Fishman's pod will cost roughly $150 a week.
These kids get one chance at being kids, and they're forced to deal with these issues that are on an adult level that they really shouldn't have to be dealing with.
In the scramble to save the school year for some, there is the risk of many more being left behind. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Up next, we're checking in on the puppy boom. In our latest episode of Nightly News Kids Edition, how did the coronavirus start? Richard Engel takes a look at a possible link between the virus and an animal you may not have heard of. Plus, this amazing boy used his love for art to launch a startup for kids. And we'll take a look at the puppy boom that is warming hearts in homes across the country. Our new episode is streaming right now. And that is Nightly News for this evening. I'm Lester Holt. Thanks for watching. Please take care of yourself and each other.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.